Hey guys, so this is a very quick tutorial just talking about how to redraft a facing after you've done a bunch of changes to a bodice piece. So I'm gonna show you guys a quick example here of what I'm talking about and why this is important, right? So if you kind of take a look at these two pieces, I've done a bunch of changes to these. This princess seam actually goes like this. I've done a bunch of changes to these. They do not resemble at all the facing pieces that come with the pattern that I purchased it with. So this tutorial is just gonna show you really quickly how to redraft those pattern pieces. Again, this is how I do it. If you find a different way, please leave the comment down below just so I can learn a new technique for how to do this. But let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing you want to do is just make sure that you trace off your original pattern pieces after they have been fixed up. So in this case, I know that these pieces fit me now. So I've gone ahead and traced them because you don't want to be dealing with something that already has a bunch of lines on there. So you can kind of see already that I've traced them here. Now, in these particular tracings, what I did just for clarity is in the orange, I highlighted the edge of the regular pattern piece so it fits evenly across the top. And then this green kind of like dash line is the actual stitch line. This is gonna be here in this space is a seam allowance, so you can kind of see that in both. Now, I'm gonna actually start at the center front, which is this guy. We're gonna start here and start to figure out our new facing piece. So the first thing we're gonna do is identify what is the top of the pattern, because if you're looking at it here, we know that this is gonna be the neck, right? This is the neck, this is the shoulder, right? This is gonna attach to the side front. And then on this side, same thing, we know that this is the side front. This side front is all the way to here, this entire section. And this is the armhole. And then we know that this is the side seam. Now, in this particular case, I'm gonna be doing a facing that is 3 inches deep. So if you visualize a facing, you know that it's going to be covering this area here. And at this point, it would meet the following piece, right? So it kind of would fit in this direction here. So in this case, we're gonna go ahead and start from the top here, the neck. We're gonna trace off the shoulder. Then we're just gonna kind of go to this side and then go the other way. And then I'll talk about joining the two pieces into one single facing piece. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're going to go from the stitch line, not the end of the pattern piece, but the stitch line, just so that we kind of get a more even sense of what's going on. So I'm gonna measure 3 inches down from center front. So you can kind of see 3 inches is gonna be here. Now I'm gonna go ahead and just continue to take my ruler and just measure out 3 inches. Now, by the time we get to here, we see that it's starting to bump into the side front, which is okay. But if we're measuring down 3 inches from the shoulder, yeah, that matches up okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and do another line here just to kind of get a better gauge. So we know that if we follow this to here, it's about 3 inches. So I'm gonna go ahead and just draw that in for you, just so that you can kind of get a gauge of what's going on. So if I do 3 inches, I'm taking my curved ruler. Now you just wanna make sure that it is a kind of an even curve. So it ends kind of in this range here. So for these purposes right now, it doesn't have to be perfect just for this tutorial, but you can kind of get a gauge. So we know that the new facing piece is going to go in this direction. Now, same thing on the other side, that it's the pieces they're going to meet to. I'm actually gonna start at the side seam and go back. And then at that point, we're going to merge it in the front with this piece here. So we'll take our regular ruler again, 3 inches. And again, I'm going from the stitch line, not the end of the pattern piece. So 3 inches down. So it kind of matches up with one of my notches actually, but I'm gonna keep going. 3 inches, 3 inches. We know it's gonna go here. So again, we're taking our curved ruler. Now I'm not gonna do a curve from here because you have to imagine this side seam is gonna meet the back piece. So you wanna make sure that this is a straight line, but about, this is what, 3/4 of an inch maybe? Let's see here. yeah, it's about 3/4 of an inch. I'm gonna keep that straight, and then the rest I'm gonna curve. So I'm gonna go ahead and get that started. It's almost an even curve here. All right, so now we're kind of getting more of a sense of what this new facing piece is gonna look like. Now, this is where the joining of it is where it gets tricky, and you kind of just have to follow along because the visualization of it is really important. Now you have to imagine that once the garment is completed, this part is not going to be part of your facing piece, right? This is the seam allowance of just these two pieces. It is not the seam allowance of the facing. So you have to imagine that this point here has to match this point here, and it has to be an even enough curve between the two pieces, right? So what I'm going to do, just so that you can kind of follow, so what I'm going to do is walk the pattern pieces. If you have not seen my video about walking pattern pieces, I'll go ahead and link that so that you guys can kind of follow that, can kind of see what that's about and where pattern pieces are supposed to meet. So I'm going to go ahead and overlap it and show you guys what that walking of the pattern looks like in this case, right? So I'm going to go ahead and match up my corners, right, of where this seam is going to match. And I'm going to start to walk my pattern. So I'm going to turn this so it's a little bit easier for me on this side. And I'm going to go ahead and match up that corner. And I am matching up the stitch line and walking it all the way around. And yeah, it looks like it's actually matching up pretty well. Now, this is where it's tricky. So I'm going to leave my pencil here, which is the exact spot that the facing matches my facing line on the other piece, right? Now, so we know that that's the exact spot, and I'm pushing really hard. You don't have to do this, but I'm doing it for this example just so that there's an indentation in the other paper in case I wiggle something out of place. So you want to take your curve, your French curve, or if you're using a smaller French curve, same thing. And I'm going to mimic that exact curve. So this is how I'm going to roll with this. I'm going to trace it on this piece. I'm just going to trace it out just to kind of get the full curve in. Then I'm going to put my hand on the table really hard, keep this ruler in place, yank this piece underneath so that the ruler stays at the exact spot. This bottom piece isn't going to move. This piece is the only piece that's going to be going away, and I'm going to continue tracing that curve onto the other pattern piece. That way it's a smooth curve. It's tricky, but you know, it's really not hard. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Just double checking everything looks good. And it's going to move out just a touch. All right, cool. So I'm gonna go ahead and trace that curve out, right? That's what that curve looks like there. And I'm gonna keep this ruler really flat. Try not to wiggle it, even though I just did. So, and then from there, I'm gonna trace that there. So you can kind of see that at this point, this is the exact same curve on both. And now I'm gonna blend it out. So I'm gonna actually take this guy and blend this part of the curve out. So I know that between the two, I'm going to take a highlighter so you can see. This curve of this facing is going to go up just slightly, and then over here it's going to go down just slightly, right? Now, we're almost done, guys. We're almost made it. So from here, the next thing you got to do is account for the seam allowances, right? So we know on this piece for the facing, the new facing, and I'll go ahead and do it with the highlighter so you can see, the new facing is going to go from the seam allowance because it needs to be attached to the back facing piece. It's going to go this way. It's going to go up. It's not going to include this because it's going to be one single facing piece. It is going to go up this way though, and it is going to include this top, right? So it's not going to include this, but it is going to go up. Now it also needs a seam allowance at the bottom, right? This is how it's either going to attach to a lining piece, or it's going to attach, or you're going to fold it under to kind of finish up that edge. So what I am going to, and the same thing on this side, right? So the facing, because this particular piece is cut on the center front, the facing is going to include the edge. It's going to include the seam allowance across the bottom. It's going to go up. It's going to include this seam allowance at the top. And in this case, because it includes the shoulder, I'll go ahead and keep that in there. But you're also going to be chopping it here because this is where it matches over here, right? So this is not going to be included. Cool. So now you just literally just trace it off. You would just trace off those two pieces, stop here, continue tracing from this to the other side. And at that point, you'd be done with your front pattern pieces. Now, as I said, when you're going to the back, just go ahead and make sure that this side matches up with the back pattern pieces, but you would do the exact same thing on the back.
I really hope that this video was helpful for you. I know for myself, I wish I would have known some of this stuff when I was starting out. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Leave your comments down below. I do read everything. If you already know how to do this and you have some extra tips, also please leave them down in the comments below. But yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.